Yes, Bob.
I was just wondering if you said that Paul never uses the word krisis or judgment related to the believer's judgment at the judgment seat of Christ. And I think I understood you to be saying by that he does that not to say that we won't be judged at the judgment seat, but to distinguish it from the great white throne judgment. And maybe you could comment on verses like James 5:9, the judge is at the door. A similar word, krites, is used there. Or even in Romans 14, when Paul talks about the judgment seat of Christ, he says, why do you judge your brother? And then he talks about the bema. So was your point the reason he doesn't specifically mention judgment is so that we'll distinguish it from the great white throne? Or was I missing something there?
The CEO of GES is very acute here. I actually said that he does not use the word krisis to describe the judgment seat of Christ, but I am aware he uses the verb krino in context related to the judgment seat of Christ. So the question is, the point I was making was that Paul apparently avoids designating the bema as krisis, because the most prominent use of krisis in the New Testament is of the final krisis, the great white throne. But nevertheless, and here's another example of polymorphous concepts, as I admitted in the paper, there's a sense in which we are judged at the judgment seat of Christ, but the level of this judgment is by no means the same as the level of the judgment that occurs at the judgment seat of Christ. And I think it's interesting and probably intentional on Paul's part that he never wants to call the bema krisis, because in his mind, krisis is what happens, the krisis is the white throne, and the assessment of believers is the bema.
I just came up with a good one. So the krisis is a crisis.
I'm going to include that in the next edition of this paper. That's good. Any other questions? Come forward if you have any. I can't believe I've solved all problems here. I used to do this with my seminary classes, and when the questioners fell silent, I said, either I have totally clarified everything or totally confused it. And they never told me which it was. I found out on the tests. Any other questions? But come forward, please. They want to get the... The 5 things? Yes. Presumably in my... Do you mean regenerated, washed, sanctified, and justified? Is that what you're talking about? I'm having trouble remembering the 5 points at issue here. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't think they had the same solemnity as biblical items because they're drawn from the American Heritage Dictionary. But yeah, I'll give you those 5. This is the American Heritage Dictionary definition of the word judicial, the senses that it may have. 1, of, pertaining to, or proper to courts of law or administration of justice. 2, decreed by or proceeding from a court of justice. 3, pertaining or appropriate to the office of a judge. 4, relative to, characterized by, or expressing judgment. Number 5 is designated theology, proceeding from a divine judgment. And all I was saying was that these are the nuances that the word judicial has, and most of them, I think, are reflected in Paul's concept of justification. The 4? Okay. These do not come from the American Heritage Dictionary. At the moment we believe, we are 1, regenerated, that is, born again. 2, washed from sin, that is, forgiven. 3, sanctified, that is, made holy and fit for the presence of God. And 4, justified, that is, declared righteous. That's not all that happens to us, but those are all things that I think are implicit in the New Covenant promise.
In your use of sanctification, in the battle that we have with lordship salvation and free grace, what would be your thought of using the term lordship sanctification as something that free grace people accept?
I would want you to define, I think I know what they mean by it, but what do you mean by lordship sanctification? Could you give me your definition as you think they would?
Well, the process, the verses that you were referring to that are including the process.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of something that, because when we say we do not believe in lordship salvation, you don't believe in lordship? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we believe in lordship.
Yes.
But we don't believe in lordship salvation in the justification sense that they use. And that brings up another whole problem of the three tenses of salvation. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of clumsy to say justification, salvation, sanctification, salvation, glorification, salvation, though it's used in all of those senses. And I'm thinking, would it be a clarifying thing if along with free grace, we say we believe in lordship sanctification? I'm just throwing that out. I don't really know if I believe it yet.
I think I understand what you're asking, and I kind of like it. Whether it will fly as a viable term is another question, but yeah, I think there is something to be said for that. If I'm hearing you correctly, I would agree that that might be a way of designating this. The problem is, of course, that when we use the bare bones term sanctification, there are more than one sense that we could attach to it. That would have the virtue of specifying what kind of sanctification we were referring to. Thank you. I'll think about it too.